Thanks for joining us. I am Nancy Fishering, and we are fortunate to bring you the Senate District 8 candidate debate. We would like to extend a special welcome to Senator Bob Rankin and challenger Karl Hanlon. Thank you both for joining us today. Before we begin, we'd like to go over some of the ground rules. Candidates should focus on ideas, not personalities. Candidates should be courteous and should not make inflammatory statements. Disrespectful or attacking speech will not be tolerated. Profane language is prohibited. Candidates may not display a prop of any kind. Candidates must strictly adhere to the time limits of each section of the debate. The moderator reserves the right to cut off a candidate who exceeds the time limit, or to redirect a candidate if the remarks are not pertinent to the elected office. Do you both agree to these rules?
I do.
Thank you. With that, we will begin with opening remarks. Senator Rankin, you have 2 minutes to make your opening remarks.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Club 20. Once again, a great job of bringing candidates together, even if it's a little bit different format, and we're online. I got involved in public service about 10 years ago after a lot of other life experiences. And, you know, I was an electrical engineer, Army officer for a few years, long career in defense aerospace as an engineer and executive. And then, you know, about 30 years in Colorado now. Part of that was in that career, and the rest of it was small business, entrepreneurship, and living in the Roaring Fork Valley and skiing a lot. So it's been a good life, but I really love what I'm doing right now because I'm representing this broad district, very diverse geography, people, lifestyles. It's a lot of travel and really motivating. I look at the next few years in Colorado legislature as super challenging, but at the same time, I am approaching it with a really positive attitude. If I look forward, I see Governor Hickenlooper ending the emergency declaration, and we return to constitutional government from the one-person control that we now have. I see us restoring the economy. I'm the senior member of the Joint Budget Committee. Big challenge, but I want to do that through jobs, not new taxes. I want us to continue to get the cost of health care down. I have a bill called the Cost of Care. I want us to take advantage of all the changes in schools that we're seeing right now looking forward. So there's a lot to do. We are outnumbered. We know that in the Western Slope. Our voice has to be heard. We have to be louder. We have to know what we're talking about. So thank you, and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Senator. Now, candidate Hanlon, you have 2 minutes to make your opening remarks. Please proceed with your remarks.
Thank you, Nancy, and I appreciate you moderating. Thanks to Senator Rankin for being here today. Thank you to Club 20. Thank you to my wife, who is in the studio but being very quiet. I'm what you might describe as a dirt road Democrat. I grew up in this district up in Jackson County on a ranch, frankly, that was so far out there that my folks decided we should go to public schools in Cheyenne so that they could get to them. From there, I went on to the University of Wyoming, spent about 4 years as a seasonal park ranger here in Colorado, and then went on to law school. But when I finished law school, I knew that the place I wanted to be was back here, what's been home to me my entire life, and practicing for and with the people of the Western Slope of Colorado. So I relocated to the Glenwood Springs area. I started practicing water law almost 25 years ago now. And from there, as every small town attorney, you develop a practice that gets more and more diverse as you look to help people around you. I started a municipal practice and have really been representing small communities, helping them grow and turn into what they want to be for the last 20 years. City of Glenwood Springs this fall will be a 20-year client of mine. So it's that commitment, that long-term commitment to the area that's so important to me. From there, I've also in public service. My wife and I, about 5 years ago, started a nonprofit. We work with kids with autism and veterans with PTSD. So all of that leads me to this moment in my life where it's time to take that next step and represent all of the people of Senate District 8 with that same both enthusiasm and commitment that I have brought to my life to this point, and I want to continue that. There are a number of challenges we face that we need to work on, from the economic recovery to healthcare to education to protecting our public lands. And it's really taking those ideas forward down at the Capitol with a voice that understands them and is deeply rooted in this district that's so critical for us over the coming years. I'm looking forward to the conversation today, and I hope that you do too.
Thank you, candidate Hanlon. Next, we will move into the question and answer portion of our debate. Questions have been submitted in advance by Club 20 members from across the region. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. The candidate who goes first on each question will also have an opportunity to offer a 30-second rebuttal to the other candidate's response to that particular question. The candidate that went first in opening remarks will offer the first response to the first question. Senator Rankin, do you support the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment? And please explain your position.
I do. It's a little bit controversial, but I've been involved in this for about 5 years now. In fact, I requested, and we had a special session in the summer of 17, bipartisan, and we recommended out of that interim committee that Gallagher be amended in full, clean amendment. Now, the problem with Gallagher is that there's a word in the Constitution, and that word is statewide. The calculation is statewide. I would favor a local approach, and that's what the amendment will do. It will turn the responsibility for protecting homeowners back over to county commissioners. If we don't do it, we will have a $500 million hit to our school budget that the state does not have the money to replace, and fire departments are out there selling fire trucks in anticipation of this not being repealed. It's very important to stabilize our property tax situation in the state.
Thank you, Senator. Candidate Hanlon, do you support the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment? And please explain your position.
Absolutely. This is one of those that's not going to be super controversial between the senator and I, because I absolutely support the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment. Senator Rankin explained some of the larger issues that he has come to grapple with in more recent years. I can tell you in my practice over the last 20 years, working with special districts, school districts, being on a school board, that the Gallagher Amendment has been an impediment as we've seen the property taxes fail to stabilize, increase in residential across particularly SD8, that if we don't take these steps to repeal Gallagher with a clean repeal and allow both local control but also for the state to think carefully about how it approaches its taxes as well, then we're facing truly a critical situation here on the Western Slope where education, fire departments, water and wastewater, all of those services are going to be cut drastically. So absolutely, please, I implore you to vote for the repeal of Gallagher.
Thank you. Senator Rankin, you now have 30 seconds to respond.
Wow, this is going well. So, I don't support increasing taxes. Repealing the Gallagher Amendment does not increase anybody's taxes. And so I just want to make that very clear. I actually asked Senator Gallagher, when you did this in 1982, did you talk about the difference between urban Colorado and rural Colorado? And he said, no, but we should have. It's a rural issue.
Thank you. Our next question goes to candidate Hanlon. What is your opinion concerning the national popular vote versus the Electoral College, and why?
That's a great question, and one that is really front and center for us right now, particularly out here in the West, where it feels sometimes like our voices aren't quite as loud or as well heard in the Electoral College process. I absolutely support a popular vote. I think it's important that we recognize the Electoral College was designed at a time when you had to carry that vote for months to get back to Washington, D.C. to make that election. I think it's clear at this point, Colorado is a great example. We have fantastic, safe voting. It needs to be every person's vote counts, and take away this practice of focusing on a couple of states and a few counties, most of them in highly populous eastern areas, to determine who becomes our president, rather than giving each one of us a voice.
Thank you, candidate. Now to you, Senator Rankin. What is your opinion concerning the national popular vote versus the Electoral College, and why?
Vote no on the amendment. I think that I oppose the action that was taken in the Colorado legislature, which is now on the ballot. Fortunately, we had the petition clause, so citizens went out and gathered signatures to put it on the ballot. I think, in fact, it's unconstitutional. The Constitution does not allow a state to modify the federal Constitution. And that's what this does. Even though it would be a number of states banding together, I believe it would, if it did pass, it takes enough states to equal 270 electoral votes, it would be challenged in the Supreme Court and would be overturned because I believe it's clearly unconstitutional. I do not want to be a subsidiary of California.
Candidate Hanlon, you will now have 30 seconds to respond.
I think what is missed in this is that when you think about how many states are moving in this direction, and there again, as we become a country that is really far more united than divided as we move forward in time, this is one of those mechanisms that makes every single person feel that they are invested in their government, and our loss of that has really been devastating to the democratic process.
Thank you. Senator Rankin, how would you reprioritize the state budget without additional revenue?
Well, that's what I do. I'm a senior member of the Joint Budget Committee. I'm the only rural and Western Slope Republican on the committee. I've done 6 budgets. So at this point, I've absorbed an awful lot of thinking and representation of us, Western Slope, on those priorities. I think we can fund our fundamental things. We got a forecast yesterday, and it's decent. It's good. We're recovering much faster than I expected. I think first we'll restore our K-12 funding, get some money in transportation, build up our reserves, but then we've got about 4 years. We get about 4 more years of worrying about those priorities that fall below the big ones. I mean, for example, I've been a real champion of intellectually and developmentally disabled folks. We got 3,000 people on that waiting list. So there's a whole bunch of priorities. I want to eliminate that list. There's a whole bunch of priorities that fall below getting K-12 funded again. So we can't just go after the ones that everybody knows about. We've got to really take care of those folks that need taken care of without wasteful spending.
Thank you, Senator. Candidate Hanlon, how would you reprioritize the state budget without additional revenue?
I think what we really have to focus on in this next upcoming budget cycle and the several that follow, recognizing that we are hampered by decisions that have been made in the past as to what we have in reserves and where we can go in the future. We have to prioritize K-12, but more importantly, we have to prioritize the health and well-being of the people of Colorado, and we have to prioritize the economic recovery of Colorado. All 3 of those things need to be the focus that we go into the legislative session with, and certainly into the budgeting cycle with, is to really hone in on those. There are some things we can do in other areas, transportation, for example, we can do. There's a lot that I've learned at the local level working with CDOT. They're working so hard, but they're hampered by a lot of both regulation that relates to how they bid projects that really cut into what's available for actual projects. I think this is a great time to take a pause and work on that as well.
Thank you. Senator Rankin, you will now have 30 seconds to respond.
I agree with the transportation. There's about $300 million in the contracting methodology that we think is there. So I think, I'll just reiterate that it's not easy to know all of these priorities. And I have opposed this issue ever since I've been there, that the loudest lobbyist or the squeakiest wheel should not be the priority. We really have to understand some issues that don't necessarily get lobbied really strongly in order to set the right priorities.
Our next question goes to Candidate Hanlon. What are the 3 most critical issues impacting the Senate District 8, and how will you address them if elected?
In a minute.
Yes.
I think really what we have to focus on in Senate District 8 obviously is everything that goes into our recovery right now, both on the health side as well as on the economic side. We really can't take our eye off that ball. But beyond that, we can't be so focused on just those issues that I spoke about just a minute ago that we lose track of the other issues that are out there that we need to address. We need to address how climate is affecting Senate District 8. We need to address how water is being impacted in Senate District 8. Those are things that we continue to face, and as we look to the future, public lands, water, those are the areas that will allow us to continue to move forward and to continue to be successful, and for working families to be successful. So those are the areas we need to focus on. In a minute, we're not going to get to all the policy details, and I know Senator Rankin is in the same boat.
Thank you, candidate. Senator Rankin, same question. What are the three most critical issues impacting Senate District 8, and how will you address them if elected?
Hard to narrow down. I would start with economic recovery, getting people back to work. And we're actually, Senate District 8 is in many ways leading it because our tourism industry was really at an all-time high this summer. We're going to open the ski resorts. I've been working with ski industry in the state on that. So economic recovery, the cost of health care. I've worked on, I was a sponsor of a reinsurance bill, lowered those costs 30%. I have a new bill called Cost of Care. So I'm going to keep hammering away at getting the cost and accessibility of health care down. Telemedicine's great, good, that's working. I think in parts of my area, transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy is a big deal. But we have to help the people who are impacted. So for me, that's really a very big issue. Taking care of our public lands, being good stewards, water, so many issues, and I agree it's difficult to cover all of them, but those are the ones I would emphasize. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Hanlon, you will now have 30 seconds to respond.
Sure, I think we need to drill down to things that really matter here, and particularly in the transitional economy. It's one of the reasons why labor has come out heavily in support of me, is that I'm willing to look guys in the eye and say, we're going to be there for you, we're going to help you as a working family. We need to absolutely make sure that we replace the jobs that we're going to be losing here on the West Slope with good paying jobs that are well benefited, and not be taken down the path of sort of the independent contractor model that has been used in the oil and gas industry most recently.
Thank you both for your responses. The next phase of the debate is the cross-examination portion. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes to ask questions of their opponent on matters pertinent to the race or office. Candidates, please keep your questions and remarks pertinent to the race, and as moderator, I reserve the right to intervene if questions get off course or if there are personal attacks of any nature. The voters want to hear how you plan to serve them as their elected official, not how well you can attack your opponent. Candidate Hanlon, will you begin the cross-examination? You have 3 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. Senator Rankin, I'd like to take a minute to talk about education in Colorado. You on the Joint Budget Committee have been in charge of those budgets in that senior role, and you referenced that you wanted to expand funding for that, even though over the years you've been a leader in cutting back that funding. On July 28th, you were the co-author of a letter that was sent to Governor Polis asking for a special session to essentially have a discussion about a voucher program while districts out here were hurting so badly for funding. Could you explain to the voters why you believe a voucher program is appropriate out here in western Colorado?
Respond. Thank you. I don't think we used the word voucher. What we asked for was a special session to address the special needs of school districts that are going back to work. There's 178 school districts, and they all have a slightly different plan. What's happening is parents are realizing that they have options. You know, they're forming these pods. They get about 10 students together, and they hire a teacher. They're going to online schools that are not part of the public school system. There's so many different ways. Education will change. I was appointed by Governor Hickenlooper and reappointed by our current governor, Polis, to be co-chair Education Leadership Council. And that's a bipartisan group of people who are, our challenge is to look forward. I had a lot of work in industry on visioning, and so I'm trying to lead a vision for the future of education. So I think this is part of it. Give parents the options of what they want to do. Why should they not be able to choose options for their kids?
So, Senator Rankin, you do agree, though, that will reduce funding available for those school districts that are out here in western Colorado that already are struggling to hire teachers. So really, this is about making things better for constituents in Denver, not the West Slope.
I really don't agree with that. I think that, you know, the options for online schools and for pods are actually greater here in western Colorado. And by the way, I've been an advocate for what we call the rural school bump. Our schools do not get an equal break in the funding. Our funding formula is ridiculous. It's wrong. It's unconstitutional. It's almost immoral. And, you know, I've been an advocate for that. I would, in parallel with options, make sure that our rural school districts are survivable. Well, you can't really run a small district of a few hundred kids the same way you run Denver public schools. And so I've always been argued for let's taking care of the overhead. Let's make sure the school system is viable, and then let's let the money follow the pupil on top of that. So I really don't think it would. This proposal would denigrate our schools.
Thank you, Mr. Rankin. It looks like we're about out of time. We didn't make it to healthcare, but hopefully we can have that conversation.
Senator Rankin, you now have 3 minutes for cross-examination.
Thank you. Here. Your would-be colleagues at the state level have offered a public option. The public option, and I oppose that, although I have been very much a part of a bipartisan team up to this point. But I departed with public option because it sets price controls and it mandatory participation. Would you support a public option?
I would support a public option that works out here in Western Colorado, absolutely. And here is why I would. If you look at the model that the Affordable Care Act was, it was based on competition. And unfortunately, if you're like me, and I don't know if you have in recent years had to go out on the market to buy health insurance, but in Garfield County right now, it costs $1,800 for a family of 4 to buy a catastrophic policy that doesn't provide first dollar coverage until you've hit an $8,000 deductible. So I'm a proponent of taking steps that absolutely reduce costs, and that would be the public option. What I'm not a proponent of is to say costs are okay now, and in a total cost of care model, to only allow it to grow 3 or 5%. That doesn't work for me.
Yeah. And would you support my cost of care bill if, in fact, it did not start where it is, but first sought some reasonable levels that we could then commit the growth from? Would you support cost of care as opposed to public option, which does not lower cost? It literally caps the cost, or it caps the price that a provider can provide rather than lowering cost. Would you support my bill?
I'd have to take a look at the bill. My gut tells me probably not in the way that you've just described it, because there again, it's an industry drafted bill that is favorable again to the Front Range. It doesn't really work out here. And out here, people don't have those kinds of options they need, and a state option is one way for us to get there.
Are you aware of what cost of care did in Oregon and Massachusetts? And
I have, and they've been
bill.
able to control costs at about a 5% increase from a flat line.
That's a lot.
Which is great, except most families can't afford the $1,800 they're paying in Garfield County today. So saying another 3 or 5% annually, that's just adding to that problem they have when they sit down at that kitchen table and have to decide, am I buying health care, am I buying food, or am I paying my rent? For me, it's about making sure that family is okay, not that the insurance company is.
So you support telling a doctor how much they can charge? Letting the state set the profit level for a hospital. That's what public option is.
Effectively right now, we need to take that approach because healthcare costs are so out of control. And I would imagine that, all of us in some way or another take advantage of exactly that kind of a system, whether it's Medicare or not.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the robust cross-examinations. We will now move into the last portion of the debate. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to present closing remarks. Candidates, this is your final opportunity to tell us why we should elect you to represent Senate District 8. Candidate Hanlon, please begin your closing remarks.
Thank you. So you've heard Senator Rankin and I joust a little bit about some of the important issues and agree on some of the other issues that are important in Senate District 8. But at the end of the day, you really have to take a look at who's got their eye on the horizon, who's looking up, and who's working to move us forward on a number of issues that are critical to us. If we think about the changes that we're seeing in our environment right now, we're seeing the hottest August on record in Mesa County. We know that for every 1 degree rise in temperature Fahrenheit, it reduces the available flow of water on the west slope by about 5%. We're up 3 to 4 degrees from where we were 130 years ago, and every single person in agriculture knows and feels the impacts that are going on right now. We need to work on those kinds of issues. We need to work on those issues to transition our economy in Western Colorado. And more importantly, we need to work to make sure that the families that make up Western Colorado have a fair chance at a good life. That's what it's about for me. What I learned out there on that dirt road in Jackson County is that you should be rewarded for your hard work. that the land matters deeply to every single one of us, that it's there for all of us, and that together we actually can make a difference. You're going to hear a lot, I think, in this election cycle about trying to parse this into little pieces. But at the end of the day, it's about the people of the West Slope of Colorado. I have a long commitment of working hard for the communities, for people, for the values that we hold out here that are so dear to all of us. And so what I'd ask is that when you look at us and you think about the future, is to really think about the future that you'd like to have and who you believe can take you there. Thank you very much. I would be humbled and honored for your support and your vote. And if nothing else, turn out and vote in November. Thank you so much for your time.
Senator Rankin, please give us your closing remarks.
Thank you, Club 20, and thank you, Mr. Hanlon. I always admire anybody who runs for office. So I think you've noticed we're not going to chop each other up personally, although I wish we could control some of our third-party mailers. But beyond that, you know, we're really talking about issues. So for me, it's really what kind of representation does the Western Slope really need? And look, the Colorado legislature is out of balance. I mean, it's single party and the governor. There's an agenda that's anti-business. It's the government controlling the profits of people like, you know, thinking they're smarter and can control private business, loading business up with social programs that business will pay for. That agenda is marching forward. So what we need to do in the Colorado legislature is to have more balance. I've been there 8 years, 6 in the legislature, and the House, and doing this. I've passed over 100 bills. I think the count's 134. Every last one of them has been bipartisan. I know how to work bipartisan in the legislature. And I know how to represent Western Colorado. I think you've heard some of that. It's healthcare, it's education, both of which I've been a real strong leader on. And I can represent us on 1,000 different line items for budget, every one of which has some implication that you have to know about and watch for. So I've been there, I've got the experience, I know how to represent Western Colorado, but most importantly, I can help continue to balance the legislature. When we had a split legislature, we still passed, you know, we had 650 bills the last time that we had a split legislature. 60, you know, there were only 62 bills that were really pertinent. You know, we passed 62% rather of all those bills were bipartisan and passed. The legislature has work to do. We don't need to be arguing, you know, over these. We need to form bipartisan partnerships, and we need to not pass an agenda set of bills. So that's what I bring. I bring balance and Western Slope experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rankin and Ken Hanlon, for participating in today's Senate District 8 debate. Your participation has helped the voters better understand how each of you plan to represent their interests if elected to office. Thank you again. Great debate. And the Colorado Board of Education third debate will begin at 12 p.m., so please stay tuned.